This is actually pretty old now, but I was surprised when I passed by a billboard in San Francisco where Levi's was calling out, quite correctly, that all asses are not created equal. It just was a surprise to me because it did not seem, it wasn't where I was expecting the brand to go, which I think is why they did it. But I think it's indicative of the culture that we're in and how things continue to shift and shift and shift, and people are becoming more and more comfortable, even in the very staid United States, with imagery like this, porn star lying on tinfoil. It's actually Marc Jacobs, again, holding his his fragrance, massive fragrance bottle. More relevantly, when we look at bigger trends, for instance, the sentiment around gay marriage, and you look back over the past 10, 11 years here, the gap narrowed between those who opposed and were in favor of, and crossed over, and now the majority are in favor. What's maybe even more interesting is that when you look by state, and you look at those who are 18 to 29, who are all these reds. So on the right side here are yeses, in favor. Over here are no's, not in favor. This whole data set here, these are all states. This whole data set here, this is all the 18 to 29-year-olds leading the charge toward yes. This is 30 to 44, this is 45 to 64. Here are the 65 and overs saying no the most solidly. So basically, in every state except these bottom 10, anybody want to guess, because you can't read it, what that state is? Alabama. What this means to me is that we're moving in one direction and we're not going back. I may be wrong about this, but I don't think so. I think it's a ratchet. I think that younger demographic, so we're pushing and we're moving this whole category into the mainstream by all sorts of mechanisms, by better design, better product, delivering on the experience, making it more approachable, better retail opportunities, and so on and so forth. We're accelerating a process that fundamentally I think is going to happen no matter what, which is that these 18 to 29-year-olds, who will be our legislators, our lawmakers, our president, and so on, they're all totally fine with this. And they're moving inexorably into power, into consumer power, into political power, into the buying position at that retail chain you want to be in. They're all totally okay with this. And as a consuming population, they're also okay with it. So we're moving there no matter what, I believe. It's a ratchet. Just like gay marriage. People say, it's not a question of whether, it's a question of when it will be legal across the entire United States. I'm all for it. Alabama, just a matter of time. I'm going to get you. So the cultural shift that's going on, that is so much more approachable, that our category is so much more approachable, is really changing who's here even today. And I think we're seeing the beginning of a major invasion of the innovators. You'll recognize these innovators because they have no prior experience in the category. They view their outsider's perspective as an asset. They're prone to long-winded discussions regarding the future of the category. The Innovator's Dilemma, another book you might want to read. And Design Thinking, an annoying concept. They're backed by venture capital, by crowdfunding, Indiegogo, you have it, you name it, their mom. They're pretty sure nobody's thought any of these thoughts they're having before. They have a headshot with a vibrator, and it takes one to know one. I just describe myself, and I think what you're going to see is that there's going to be a lot of this. And I think that I'm already feeling that here today. I had a couple of questions after our panel. I was approached by a couple of designers who are moving into the category, and that happens all the time. Almost every day I receive an email, I'm opening a new retail concept, it's going to be totally different from what's out there. I have a product idea. I mean, how many of you get, I have a product idea emails? Anybody get those? Just me? Okay, well there's a lot of product ideas out there, I can tell you. And probably a lot of them are really good. It's just that the headache of actually working with that person might not make it worthwhile. And I applaud, side note, Love Hunting for seeing them squeal through. I think it's remarkable they do sort of a crowdsourced design project in this category. So the taboo that once insulated this industry and made it this little protected bubble that we were in is really just a light dusting of risque over any MBA's cappuccino. I get calls from people at Stanford, at Berkeley, all the time. Hey, I'm doing a project on vibrators. I've been involved in like 7 different undergraduate projects involving vibrators. It's just cool and neato for them. It's not scary or risque or taboo. It just has a little bit of edge, and they like that. It's a plus. That same effect, obviously, is being noticed by major brands. So we have Durex and Trojan, as we all know. We had Philips that came away a little bit bloodied by their work in the industry. We have others that, logically could move into this space, one might think. I don't know that Victoria's Secret's coming anywhere near this anytime soon. But really what we have is major multinational brand conglomerates that are really looking at this industry, and it's too big and too fragmented and too delicious for them to ignore. At some point, we're going to reach that crossing point where their fear is going to decrease enough that their excitement is going to cross over that, and they're going to say, fuck it, let's do it. Some of them already have, obviously, but more will. The thing to note here is that they could buy the entire industry. So when we're talking about these people and talking about whether or not they have the expertise, whether or not they know enough, whether or not it's too difficult to create a vibrator that actually works well, it's easy to underestimate, look at Philips. I'm all on board with all those arguments. But the reality is, they'll just hire one of you guys. And then they've got all the insider knowledge they need, and they've got all the backing they need. And so it's really just a matter of time. Again, it's just a question of when. I think it's going to be a little while before we see more than Durex and Trojan. Durex and Trojan need to be a little more successful than they currently are before other people are lured into this space. But at that point, this question of when it was this sort of push-down economy before, this push-down market of distributors were sort of driving everything, it was who's your distributor. Now it's going to be sort of who's your daddy, who's got your back, and it will be very different for one of you to be a company that has, Reckitt standing behind you, or limited brands, or what have you. You have a very different set of concerns at that point. This is a moth. This is a peppered moth, and it looked like this in the early 1800s. This is a peppered moth, not so peppered anymore, in 1895. Stop me if you already know this fairy tale. It's not a fairy tale. So what happened between 1800 and 1895? And more importantly, in 1956, it went back to being like this. 1895, 95% of the moths looked like this. Well, this was in Manchester at the beginning of the 1800s that the Industrial Revolution first started. And billows of smoke is an actual photograph. It's hard to see. That's the sun. Billows of smoke coated the city with black. The white bark of the tree where this moth usually hung out turned black, and all the white moths got eaten. So the darker moths survived, and moths got darker and darker and darker, and that's how you got this diversity or evolution. There's a selection pressure, which is the bird, that really decided who was going to make it through this. And I think that we're in this evolutionary cycle ourselves. The good news is we're not just moths that need to die to learn. We actually control our destiny. And so I think everybody's doing this already, but it's just a question of being heads up. But I think it's good to look forward a little bit and to contemplate what might be some of the selection pressures that will be acting upon our industry in the coming years. Imagine you are at Johnson & Johnson, you decide, yes, Church & Dwight and Reckitt have had enough success, let's launch a vibrator. You know what, let's go one step further. Since we make all these products that have Class 2 FDA certification, and it's kind of our thing, why don't we go ahead and make an FDA certified vibrator? We'll get studies that say it's the best vibrator, or that it is this effective precisely. We can make exactly those claims on the packaging because they are backed by the appropriate human trials. And let's go out there with an FDA certification. Suddenly, it may or may not be a selection pressure that's applied to all of us. And I don't have expertise in FDA certification. I don't know if you guys do, but between now and then, you might want to look into it. So we actually looked into it a long time ago and decided it just looked like hell. So this idea of labeling products for novelty use only as this liability dodge, well, first of all, that was a bit of a fallacy. It wasn't going to protect you a whole lot. Secondly, I think we're more at the point of for novelty use never in the future, where you really can't take that route. And I don't think that any real legal body, if you harm somebody with something that looked exactly like a vibrator, imagine I put out a bicycle helmet that looked just like a real bicycle helmet for kids, but it's just for play. And a kid wears it on the bike and is in a coma as a result of wearing this novelty helmet. Do you think the court's going to decide in my favor? I think the court's going to say, you had a responsibility putting this out there anyway. Laws. There was something really brilliant written over this that I didn't get. So I think the idea here really is, let's look forward to those selection pressures and try to anticipate them. So I'm going to give you a little insight into our insidious plan, or nefarious as it says here. I actually gave the same insight to a small group of people at Babeland who had an event back in 2010 or so. And then I wrote something sort of similar and as an op-ed piece for the AVN. Sorry to mention that name here, but and so I want to present the same idea here if it doesn't bore you too much. Here's what we're doing. We're not alone in this, everybody's doing this, but this is what we have been mapping for quite some time as why we do what we do and how we feel good about it. It's going to be hard for you to read, so I'll read. In this first circle it says, make the subject approachable and therefore discussable. Starting a conversation that educates and emboldens. Creating an opportunity for closer scrutiny and higher expectations. Raising the bar for success in the market and requiring the industry to respond. Which gives us, on the left, customer communication, customer education, customer empowerment, to industry accountability. Where this takes us next is a cycle. That industry accountability increases the percent of customers who have an improved experience. Those customers learn from and share their experience, evolving and reinforcing the selection criteria, back to this Darwinian market principles, for the next generation of offerings. And at the same time, talking to their friends as referrals, educating and inspiring new consumers to consider their options. So this is our customer now, talking to other customers and doing our work for us, all of us. So that evolution then favors producers who stay on or ahead of the curve, and that pressures all in the industry to either innovate, to imitate, which happens all the time in nature as in markets, or depreciate, meaning you can't sell a high price point product that doesn't have a high price point value to it, that doesn't actually merit that price point. Increasingly, that margin bubble is going to collapse. So customer satisfaction, customer loyalty, increased expectation, industry competition, and industry progress. I see this as kind of a pain in the ass for everybody, including us, but absolutely necessary, because the only way that we're going to succeed as an industry is by the customer being the one who wins. We're talking about the industry having been flipped upside down in the past 10 years, in my opinion. From, I'm a manufacturer with a distributor, or I'm a manufacturer and a distributor, I'm pushing product out to the stores, this is what you have to choose from my catalog of 2,000 products. And you work with me because it's just too much of a pain in the ass for you to find products elsewhere, and you don't really have any options. So I'm pushing this product out. The consumer gets what the consumer gets. So trickle down. Now what we're seeing is the opposite. The customer says, you know what? I like this, and I'm going to blog about it. And this conversation that's happening now is changing entirely the dynamic, where the customer is pulling the product into the store. And the customer went from being a rigid noodle to being a wet noodle. You can't push the wet noodle. So I think where we are now is we've made it into this virtuous circle of evolution of the industry, and I see everybody doing it. And I walked the show yesterday, and there are like 7 more shows in this couple of weeks. That totally confuses me, but when you walk those shows, you can see there's real activity. People are really making cool product. So we've made it to that virtuous circle, and I think that's a very good thing.